The marble floors of Henderson Tower gleamed under the afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. 27 floors of premium office space in downtown Chicago, where the city's most successful companies paid top dollar for prestige addresses. And there I was, Natalie Myers, pushing a cleaning cart down the executive hallway, wearing a plain gray uniform with maintenance embroidered on the pocket. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Natalie? Oh my God, what are you doing here? I looked up to see my sister Madison standing in the doorway of Hamilton and Associates law firm, her designer heels clicking against the polished marble. Her perfectly styled blonde hair and tailored blazer screamed success, while I stood there in my janitor's uniform holding a mop. "Working," I said simply, continuing to wipe down the brass elevator buttons. Madison's laugh was sharp, echoing through the hallway. "Working? You mean cleaning?" She gestured at my cart with obvious disgust. "Natalie, this is embarrassing. What if someone I know sees you?" "Someone you know is seeing me. You." "You know what I mean." Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I work for one of the most prestigious law firms in Chicago. I can't have my sister doing this. What would my colleagues think?" I squeezed out the mop, the water dripping steadily into the bucket. "Maybe they'd think I'm honest work pays the bills." "Honest work?" Madison scoffed. "This isn't honest work. It's pathetic work. You have a college degree, Natalie. You could do so much better than this." What Madison didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the building maintenance company uniform I wore was just a cover. What she definitely didn't know was that the very marble floors she walked on, the elevator she rode every morning, the office space her law firm rented for $60,000 a month, all belonged to me. 3 months earlier, I had inherited something that would change everything. But that morning, as I sat in my modest studio apartment in Lincoln Park, I was just Natalie Myers, a recent college graduate with a business degree and no clear direction in life. My phone buzzed with another text from Madison. "Job interview at Hamilton and Associates today. Wish me luck. Some of us are actually trying to make something of ourselves." I set the phone aside and opened my laptop to yet another rejection email. "Thank you for your interest in the marketing coordinator position. While your qualifications are impressive, we have decided to move forward with another candidate." The same generic response I'd received 15 times in the past month. My bank account showed $347.22. Rent was due in 12 days. The knock on my door interrupted my spiral of self-pity. I opened it to find a tall man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Ms. Natalie Myers?" "Yes." "I'm Robert Chen, attorney with Morrison and Associates. I represent the estate of Eleanor Henderson. May I come in?" Eleanor Henderson? The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I led him to my small kitchen table, the only surface clear enough for paperwork. "Ms. Myers, I'm here regarding your great-aunt Eleanor's will. She passed away 6 weeks ago." Great-aunt? I tried to remember. I don't think I knew I had a great-aunt Eleanor. "She was your grandmother's sister. According to our records, she never married and had no children. You and your sister Madison are her only living relatives." Mr. Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Miss Henderson was quiet, particular about her final wishes. She left specific instructions regarding her estate." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in elegant script. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Natalie, we never met, but I've been watching you from afar. Your grandmother spoke of you often before she passed, how you were the kind one, the one who helped others without expecting anything in return. She told me about the time you gave your lunch money to a classmate who couldn't afford food, and how you spent your weekends volunteering at the animal shelter instead of going to parties. I've made my fortune in real estate, but money means nothing without someone worthy to inherit it. I've seen how Madison treats people she considers beneath her, the way she spoke to my housekeeper, her dismissive attitude towards service workers. Wealth in the wrong hands only breeds more cruelty. But you, Natalie, have something money can't buy: character. I'm leaving you Henderson Tower and all associated properties. The building generates approximately $2.8 million annually in rental income. There are conditions, however. You must work in the building for at least 6 months in any capacity before you can claim full ownership. I want you to understand what it means to truly work, to see how the other half lives. The law firm on the 20th floor, Hamilton and Associates, has just hired your sister. This is not a coincidence. I arranged it. Consider it a test of character for both of you. Use this gift wisely, dear Natalie, and remember, true power isn't about flaunting wealth. It's about using it to make the world a little kinder. Your great-aunt, Eleanor Henderson. My hands shook as I read the letter twice, then a third time. Mr. Chen sat patiently, watching my expression change from confusion to disbelief to something approaching shock. "Is this real?" I asked. "Very real. The building is worth approximately $47 million. The rental income from the 26 businesses currently leasing space provides substantial monthly revenue. All of it becomes yours after you complete the 6-month work requirement." "What kind of work?" "Any work within the building." Miss Henderson left those details deliberately vague. She wanted you to choose your own path. I stared at the letter again. Henderson Tower. I'd walked past it dozens of times. The sleek glass and steel structure that dominated the downtown skyline. And Madison? Working there wasn't a coincidence. "There's one more thing," Mr. Chen said, pulling out another document. "Miss Henderson arranged for you to be hired by Precision Building Services, the company that handles maintenance for Henderson Tower. Your employment begins Monday morning. They believe you're simply a new hire who needs the work. So I'd be working as whatever capacity Precision Building Services assigns you, likely cleaning, basic maintenance, that sort of thing. Your true identity as the building's owner must remain secret until the 6 months are complete." Those were Miss Henderson's explicit instructions. Over the weekend, I researched everything I could about Henderson Tower. Built in 1987 by Henderson Development Corporation, it housed some of Chicago's most successful businesses. The tenant list read like a who's who of corporate America. Hamilton and Associates on the 20th floor, Tech Vision Solutions occupying floors 15 through 17, Meridian Financial on the top floor, and 23 other companies paying premium rent for the prestige address. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I stood outside Henderson Tower at 6 a.m. sharp, wearing the gray uniform Precision Building Services had provided. The building looked different from this angle, more imposing, more real. Soon it would all be mine. "You must be Natalie." A woman in her 50s approached me, keys jangling from her belt. "I'm Dorothy Walsh, building supervisor. Ready for your first day?" The next few hours passed in a blur of training. Dorothy showed me the service elevators, the supply closets on each floor, the proper way to mix cleaning solutions. She explained the building's schedule. Most tenants arrived between 7:30 and 9 a.m., which meant the bulk of our work happened before and after business hours. "You'll be assigned floors 18 through 22, Dorothy said as we rode the service elevator. "Hamilton and Associates is on 20. They're particular about their space, very image-conscious. Try to be invisible when they're around." Invisible? If only she knew. At 8:47 a.m., I was polishing the brass handrails on the 20th floor when the elevator chimed. A group of well-dressed professionals emerged, their conversations echoing through the hallway. Among them, unmistakable in her confidence and designer clothes, was Madison. She walked right past me without a glance, deep in conversation with an older man in a navy suit. "The Henderson account is going to be huge for us, Mr. Hamilton. If we can land this estate settlement, it'll be our biggest case this year." Henderson account. My pulse quickened. Were they talking about Eleanor's estate? "Madison, I'm putting you as lead associate on this one. the man, presumably Mr. Hamilton, said as they approached the firm's glass doors. The deceased woman left quite a complex will. Apparently, she left a $47 million building to some nobody who has to work as a janitor for 6 months before she can claim it. Ridiculous, if you ask me. Madison's laugh was sharp. Who leaves that kind of money to someone who needs to clean toilets for a living? Clearly, the old woman wasn't in her right mind. They disappeared through the glass doors, leaving me standing in the hallway with my cleaning supplies, my heart pounding. Madison was working on Eleanor's estate, my case, and she had no idea the nobody they were talking about was her own sister. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The irony was almost too perfect. Madison, who had always looked down on me, who had just mocked the very idea of someone like me inheriting wealth, was now working to ensure I received my inheritance. And she was doing it while believing I was just another invisible janitor cleaning her workplace. I finished the brass handrails with extra care, making sure they gleamed. After all, I wanted my building to look its best. The rest of the morning passed quietly. I cleaned the break rooms on floors 18 and 19, emptied trash cans, and restocked paper towels in the bathrooms. The work was honest and straightforward, nothing like the complicated corporate politics I'd imagined from my business classes. During my lunch break, I sat in the building's small employee cafeteria in the basement, eating a sandwich and thinking about Eleanor's letter. She wanted me to understand what it meant to truly work, to see how the other half lives. Already, I was beginning to understand what she meant. The service workers, Dorothy, the security guards, the maintenance staff, they were the ones who kept this gleaming tower running. They arrived before dawn and stayed after dark, making sure everything was perfect for the executives who barely acknowledged their existence. They were invisible, essential, and completely undervalued. At 2:30 p.m., I was replacing the flowers in the lobby planters when I overheard two women from Tech Vision Solutions talking by the elevators. "Did you see the new girl from Hamilton and Associates? The blonde one?" "Madison something. She seems nice enough." "Nice. She was incredibly rude to the delivery guy this morning. Acted like he was contaminating the air by breathing near her desk." Some people think having a law degree make them better than everyone else. I kept my head down, focusing on arranging the fresh lilies. This was Madison they were talking about, my sister, who had always been competitive but never cruel. Or maybe I'd just never seen it, because I'd never been in a position to observe her around people she considered beneath her notice. The elevator dinged, and both women stepped inside, their conversation fading as the doors closed. I was alone in the lobby with my thoughts and the scent of fresh flowers. At 6 p.m., as most of the building's tenants headed home, I was finishing up the 20th floor when Madison emerged from Hamilton and Associates. She looked tired, her earlier confidence replaced by the stress of a long day. She barely glanced in my direction as she walked toward the elevators, her heels clicking against the marble floor I'd polished that morning. This time, I was ready. "Madison?" She turned, surprised to hear her name. When she saw me in my gray uniform, her expression shifted from confusion to something approaching horror. "Natalie, what are you doing here?" And that's when I spoke the words that would set everything in motion. Working. Madison's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, embarrassment, then something that looked almost like anger. "Working as what, exactly?" she asked, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She glanced around the empty hallway as if afraid someone might overhear. "Building maintenance," I said, continuing to wipe down the water fountain. "It's honest work." "Honest work?" Madison stepped closer, her designer bag clutched against her chest. "Natalie, this is ridiculous. You have a degree from Northwestern. You speak 3 languages. You graduated magna cum laude, for crying out loud. What are you doing pushing a mop around?" "Paying my bills." "This is so embarrassing." Madison ran her hands through her perfectly styled hair. "I just started working here. What if my colleagues see you? What if Mr. Hamilton finds out the janitor is my sister?"
I looked up from the water fountain, meeting her eyes, for the first time. Would that be a problem? Of course it would be a problem. I'm trying to build a career here, Natalie. I'm the youngest associate they've ever hired. I can't have people thinking I come from this kind of background. What kind of background is that? Madison gestured at my uniform, my cleaning cart, the mop in her hands. You know what I mean.
But I did know what she meant, and that was the problem. In Madison's world, there were people who mattered and people who didn't, people who deserved respect and people who were invisible. And right now, in her mind, I belonged to the invisible category. Look, Madison said, softening her tone slightly, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying you could do better. You're smart, Natalie. You could get a real job. This is a real job. You know what I mean. A professional job, something with a future. I could talk to Mr. Hamilton, see if they need another paralegal, or I'm fine where I am. Madison stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. I don't understand you. I really don't. But please, if you have to do this, could you at least try to stay out of my way? I'm working on some really important cases, and I can't afford any distractions. Important cases? Yes, actually. We just landed at the Henderson estate settlement. It's worth millions. The deceased woman left this massive building to some random person. But there are complications with the will. It's going to be huge for my career. I felt a chill run down my spine. Madison was talking about my inheritance like it was just another case, another stepping stone for her ambition. She had no idea she was talking about my future, my great-aunt's final gift. That sounds complicated, I managed. It is. The beneficiary has to work some menial job for 6 months before she can claim the inheritance. Can you imagine? $47 million, and she has to clean toilets first. Honestly, rich people and their bizarre demands. Madison's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. I have to go. Client dinner tonight. But Natalie, seriously, think about what I said. You're better than this. She click-clacked away toward the elevators, leaving me alone in the hallway with the scent of her expensive perfume and the echo of her words. You're better than this. But what if this was exactly where I needed to be? The next morning brought new challenges. Dorothy assigned me to deep clean the executive break room on the 21st floor, which meant I'd be working during regular business hours. The risk of running into Madison again was high, but I couldn't avoid it forever. The 21st floor housed Meridian Financial, and their break room was a study in corporate excess. Marble countertops, imported coffee machines, a fully stocked wine refrigerator, and windows overlooking Lake Michigan. I was scrubbing the granite sink when 3 women in expensive suits walked in, their conversation already in progress. Did you hear about the new girl at Hamilton and Associates? One of them said, opening the wine fridge. The blonde one? She seems sharp. Sharp, maybe, but did you see how she treated the Uber Eats driver yesterday? The poor guy was just trying to deliver her lunch, and she acted like he was personally offending her by existing. I kept scrubbing, trying to remain invisible while my ears burned. Some people think success means you get to look down on everyone else, the third woman added. I saw her snap at the security guard downstairs because he asked to see her ID. Like, honey, he's just doing his job. Speaking of security, did you notice they hired a new janitor? Young woman, always polite, complete opposite of Princess Madison. They were talking about me. I felt my cheeks flush as I continued cleaning, grateful they couldn't see my face. At least someone around here has manners, one of them said, unlike Miss Law Degree, who thinks service workers are beneath her notice. The women grabbed their drinks and left, their conversation fading down the hallway. I stood alone in the break room, processing what I'd heard. Madison wasn't just dismissive of me. She was rude to everyone she perceived as lower status. The delivery drivers, the security guards, anyone who worked with their hands instead of their minds. This wasn't the sister I remembered growing up. Or maybe it was, and I'd just never been in a position to see it clearly. That afternoon, while restocking supplies in the 20th floor storage closet, I overheard Madison talking to someone in the Hamilton and Associates break room next door. The walls were thin and voices carried. The Henderson case is more complicated than we initially thought, Madison was saying. The beneficiary, Natalie Myers, she's proving difficult to locate for the formal proceedings. My heart stopped. They were looking for me. Have you tried the last known address? A male voice asked, probably one of the other associates. Dead end. She moved out of her apartment, and none of her references know where she went. It's like she vanished. Honestly, if someone told me I was inheriting $47 million, I'd make myself pretty easy to find. Maybe she doesn't know? Madison laughed. How could she not know? The lawyer said he delivered the will personally. No, I think she knows. She's probably working at some angle, trying to figure out how to get around the 6-month work requirement. What kind of work requirement? She has to work in the building for 6 months before she can claim full ownership. Apparently, the old woman wanted her to understand the value of honest work, or some nonsense like that, as if working a menial job teaches you anything useful. I pressed my back against the storage closet wall, my cleaning supplies forgotten. Madison was talking about me like I was some kind of con artist, someone trying to game the system. She had no idea I was literally 50 feet away, doing exactly what the will required. Still, $47 million. That's life-changing money. For someone like that, maybe. Personally, I'd rather earn my success than have it handed to me. There's something to be said for building your own fortune through talent and hard work. The irony was almost unbearable. Madison, who had grown up in the same middle-class household I had, who had never wanted for anything, was criticizing someone for inheriting money while she actively worked to ensure that inheritance went through. The contradiction seemed lost on her entirely. Anyway, Madison continued, Mr. Hamilton wants this case resolved quickly. The sooner we find this Natalie Myers and get her to comply with the will's terms, the sooner we collect our fee. And it's going to be a substantial fee. Their voices faded as they moved away from the break room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing understanding of just how little my sister thought of people like me. People who worked with their hands, people who cleaned up after others, people who didn't wear designer suits to work every day. That evening, as I was finishing up the lobby floors, I noticed a commotion near the building's main entrance. A delivery driver, the same one the Meridian Financial women had mentioned, was arguing with Madison near the elevator bank. "Look, lady, I'm just trying to do my job," the driver was saying. He was young, maybe early 20s, wearing a rumpled uniform and carrying an insulated bag. "Your office ordered this food. I'm here to deliver it." "I didn't order anything," Madison snapped, not even looking at the receipt he was holding out. "And even if I did, you can't just wander around the building looking for people. There are procedures." "The receptionist told me to bring it up to the 20th floor." "Well, the receptionist was wrong. I'm not paying for food I didn't order, and I don't appreciate being bothered with this." The kid looked confused and frustrated. He was probably making minimum wage plus tips, and Madison was treating him like he was personally trying to ruin her day. I set down my mop and walked over. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" Madison turned, her expression shifting when she saw me. "Natalie, this doesn't concern you." But I was already looking at the receipt in the delivery driver's hand. Hamilton and Associates, 20th floor, ordered by M. Spencer. "That's Madison Spencer," I said to the driver. "Same person." I looked at Madison. "Spencer is your middle name." Madison's face flushed. "I use my middle name professionally. It sounds more distinguished." "So you did order this food." "I forgot, okay? I've been busy." Madison fumbled in her purse and pulled out a $20 bill, thrusting it at the driver without making eye contact. "Here, keep the change." The total on the receipt was $24.50. She'd shorted him $4.50 and called it a tip. "Actually," I said, pulling out my wallet, "let me cover the rest." I handed the driver a $10 bill. "Sorry for the confusion." The kid looked grateful and a little surprised. Thanks, really. You didn't have to do that. Everyone deserves to be paid fairly for their work. After the driver left, Madison stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? You barely know him. And you're working as a janitor. You probably need $10 more than he does. Maybe that's exactly why I understand what it means. Madison was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. I don't get you, Natalie. I really don't. But I need to get back upstairs. Some of us have real work to do. She walked away, leaving me alone in the lobby with my mop and the growing realization that the sister I thought I knew might be someone else entirely. And tomorrow, I'd have to face her again, still pretending to be just another invisible worker in the building I secretly owned. But tonight, for the first time since this whole thing started, I was beginning to understand what Eleanor had meant about character being worth more than money. The question was, what was I going to do with that understanding? The third week of my employment at Henderson Tower brought unexpected complications. I was beginning to understand the building's rhythm, which executives arrived early, which floors stayed busy late into the evening, and which companies treated the maintenance staff like human beings versus which ones treated us like furniture. Tech Vision Solutions on floors 15 through 17 fell into the first category. Their employees actually said good morning and thank you. Hamilton and Associates, unfortunately, fell squarely into the second. Tuesday morning found me deep cleaning the law firm's conference room, which had hosted a late client meeting the night before. Empty coffee cups and crumpled papers littered the massive mahogany table, and someone had spilled red wine on the carpet. As I worked to remove the stain, I couldn't help but notice the documents scattered across the table. Henderson Estate Settlement. My name appeared on several pages, along with detailed financial breakdowns and legal strategies. I shouldn't have looked, but seeing your own inheritance discussed in the clinical legal terms was impossible to ignore. One document caught my attention, a memo from Mr. Hamilton to Madison titled Accelerating Timeline, Henderson Matter. I glanced toward the door, confirmed I was alone, and read quickly. Madison. The Henderson estate is worth significantly more than initially assessed. Updated appraisal puts the building value at $52 million, with annual rental income of $3.2 million. Client stands to inherit one of Chicago's most valuable commercial properties. Priority: locate beneficiary immediately and expedite 6-month work requirement. Potential strategies for challenging will if the beneficiary proves difficult. This case could make or break your partnership track. RH. My blood ran cold. They weren't just processing Eleanor's will. They were looking for ways around it. And Madison's entire career advancement was tied to managing my inheritance. Find what you're looking for. I spun around to find Madison standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. How long had she been watching me? Just cleaning up from last night's meeting, I said, quickly gathering the scattered papers into a neat pile. Those are confidential legal documents, Natalie. I wasn't reading them. I was just what? Accidentally absorbing information about cases worth millions of dollars? Madison stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Do you have any idea how serious this is? My heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain calm. Seriously, how? Attorney-client privilege for starters, confidentiality agreements, the fact that you could lose your job and I could face disciplinary action just for having this conversation. I didn't read anything important. Madison studied my face for a long moment. You know what? I don't think I believe you. She walked to the table and quickly shuffled the documents together, placing them in a folder marked confidential. But as she did, her phone rang. Madison Spencer, she answered, walking toward the windows. Yes, Mr. Hamilton. No, I haven't located her yet. The address from the will was a dead end, and none of her former employers have current contact information. I continued cleaning, trying to appear busy while listening to Madison discuss my disappearance with her boss. The irony was almost too much. Here she was, literally standing 3 feet away from the person she was desperately trying to find, complaining about how difficult I was being. I've tried social media, professional networks, even contacted her old university, Madison continued. It's like Natalie Myers just vanished into thin air, which, frankly, is suspicious behavior for someone who stands to inherit this much money. Suspicious behavior. As if wanting privacy made me a criminal. Yes, sir, I understand the urgency. The 6-month clock is ticking whether we find her or not. If she doesn't claim the inheritance by the deadline, the entire estate reverts to the city of Chicago. We need to locate her soon. My stomach dropped. Was there a deadline? Eleanor's letter hadn't mentioned any timeline beyond the 6-month work requirement. How much time did I have left? Madison ended the call and turned back to me. You didn't hear any of that conversation. Hear what conversation? Good. She gathered her things and headed for the door, then paused. Natalie, I meant what I said about finding something better. This job, it's beneath you. And frankly, having you here is becoming complicated for me. Complicated how? People are starting to notice. My colleagues are asking questions about the janitor who speaks like she has a college education and acts like she belongs in boardrooms instead of supply closets. Maybe because I do have a college education. That's exactly the problem. You're drawing attention to yourself, and by extension, to me. I can't afford that right now. After Madison left, I stood alone in the conference room, my mind racing. There was a deadline on my inheritance that I didn't know about. Madison's law firm was looking for ways to challenge Eleanor's will, and my own sister was becoming suspicious of my behavior. That afternoon, while restocking bathroom supplies on the 19th floor, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. 2 Hamilton and Associates paralegals were standing by the copy machine, their voices low but carrying clearly through the empty hallway. Madison's really pushing hard on this Henderson case, one of them said. She's been working 16-hour days. Well, yeah, if she pulls this off, she's basically guaranteed a partnership track. Did you see her presentation to Mr. Hamilton yesterday? She found 3 potential grounds for challenging the will. Challenging it? How? Mental capacity of the deceased, undue influence, procedural irregularities. If any of those stick, the inheritance could be declared invalid. My hands went numb. Madison wasn't just trying to find me. She was actively working to make sure I never received Eleanor's inheritance. That seems kinda ruthless, even for Madison. Are you kidding? This is Madison Spencer we're talking about. She'd step on her own grandmother if it meant advancing her career. Did you hear what she said about the beneficiary? What? She called her some nobody who probably doesn't deserve the money anyway. Said if someone's too stupid to claim a $47 million inheritance, maybe they shouldn't have it. Some nobody. Too stupid to claim my own inheritance? Madison was talking about me, her own sister, like I was just another obstacle to overcome. That evening, I stayed late to finish the executive floors. Most of the building had emptied out by 7 p.m., leaving me alone with my thoughts and the soft hum of the ventilation system. I was vacuuming the 20th floor hallway when I heard voices coming from Hamilton and Associates. Through the glass doors, I could see Madison working alone in the conference room, surrounded by stacks of documents and empty coffee cups. Her phone was on speaker, and I could hear Mr. Hamilton's voice clearly. The mental capacity angle is our strongest argument, he was saying. Eleanor Henderson was 86 years old when she wrote this will. If we can demonstrate any signs of cognitive decline... I've already requested her medical records, Madison replied, and I'm having our investigator look into her relationship with the beneficiary. If Natalie Myers had any contact with Eleanor before the inheritance, we might be able to prove undue influence. Good thinking. What about the work requirement? That's where it gets interesting. The will specifies that Natalie has to work in Henderson Tower for 6 months, but it doesn't specify what kind of work or who has to verify it. If we can't locate her, she can't fulfill the requirement, and the inheritance becomes invalid. Unless she's already working there and we don't know it. Madison laughed. Where would she be working?
The only employment opportunities in this building are professional positions that require background checks and references, or menial jobs like maintenance and security. Someone with Natalie's education wouldn't take a job cleaning toilets just to claim an inheritance. Someone with Natalie's education. The dismissal in her voice was unmistakable. Still, Mr. Hamilton continued, we should be thorough. Have someone check with building management about recent hires. My blood turned to ice. If they checked with Precision Building Services, they'd find out about me immediately. Dorothy had all my employment records, my background check, everything. I'll handle it tomorrow, Madison said. But honestly, if Natalie Myers was working in this building, I'd have noticed her by now. It's not like janitors are invisible. But that was exactly the problem. To Madison, janitors were invisible. We all were.
I turned off the vacuum and retreated to the service elevator, my mind racing. Madison was going to check with building management tomorrow. She'd discover that Natalie Myers had been hired by Precision Building Services 3 weeks ago. She'd realize that her own sister had been working under her nose this entire time, fulfilling Eleanor's requirements while Madison actively worked to steal my inheritance. But she'd also realized that I'd been listening to confidential conversations, observing privileged legal documents, and potentially gathering information that could derail her entire case. As I rode the service elevator down to the basement, I realized that tomorrow would change everything. The question was, would I be ready for what came next? The building's basement storage area was quiet and dimly lit, filled with industrial equipment and cleaning supplies. I sat on an overturned bucket, surrounded by the tools of my trade, and thought about Eleanor's letter. She'd wanted me to understand what it meant to truly work, to see how the other half lives. Mission accomplished. I'd learned that the other half was treated as subhuman by people like my sister. I'd learned that honest work was only respected when it came with a paycheck and a title. And I'd learned that family loyalty had its limits when money was involved. Tomorrow, when Madison discovered the truth, I'd have to decide who I wanted to be, the invisible janitor who cleaned up after others, or the building owner who could clean the house in an entirely different way. Either way, the game was about to change completely. I arrived at Henderson Tower the next morning with a knot in my stomach and a plan. If Madison was going to check employment records today, I needed to be prepared for the fallout. But first, I needed to understand exactly what legal ground I was standing on. Dorothy was in her office by 6 a.m., as always, reviewing the day's assignments over coffee that could strip paint. I knocked on her open door. "Morning, Natalie. You're here early." "Dorothy, can I ask you something? Hypothetically speaking, if someone from one of the tenant companies wanted to check our employment records, would you share them?" She looked up from her clipboard, eyebrows raised. "That's an oddly specific hypothetical. Why?" "Just curious about privacy policies." "Well, we don't share employee information without a court order or official request from law enforcement. Tenant companies have no right to our personnel files." Dorothy studied my face. "Is someone bothering you? Because if any of these suit-wearing prima donnas are giving you trouble, I'll handle it." Relief flooded through me. "No trouble, just wondering." "Good, because you've been doing excellent work, Natalie. Best new hire we've had in years. The tenants barely know you exist, which is exactly how we like it." I barely know I exist. If only she knew how ironic that statement was. I spent the morning cleaning the lower floors, staying away from Hamilton and Associates while I figured out my next move. But around 10 a.m., Dorothy's voice crackled over the building's intercom system. "Natalie Myers to the supervisor's office immediately." My blood turned to ice. This was it. Somehow, Madison had found out. I took the service elevator to the basement, my hands shaking slightly as I walked down the narrow hallway to Dorothy's office. Through the glass window, I could see her sitting across from someone in an expensive suit. Madison. I paused outside the door, taking a deep breath. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. "Come in," Dorothy called. Madison's face when she saw me was a masterpiece of shock, confusion, and slowly dawning realization. Her mouth actually fell open. "Natalie?" she whispered.
Miss Spencer here was asking about our recent hires, Dorothy said, apparently oblivious to the drama unfolding in her office. Says she's conducting a routine background check for building security purposes. I told her we don't share employee information without proper documentation.
Madison was staring at me like she'd seen a ghost. Natalie Myers, she said slowly. You've been working here this whole time? Is there a problem? Dorothy asked, looking between us. No problem, I said quickly. Miss Spencer and I know each other. Do you know each other? Madison's voice was getting higher. We're sisters, and you've been… She caught herself, glancing at Dorothy. Could we have a moment alone? Dorothy looked confused, but shrugged. I'll be checking supplies in the storage room. 5 minutes. The moment Dorothy left, Madison exploded. Are you out of your mind? She hissed, closing the office door. You've been working here for 3 weeks. Do you have any idea what you've done? My job? Your job? Natalie, I've been searching for you everywhere. The entire firm has been trying to locate you for the Henderson estate case. And you've been here the whole time, mopping floors and emptying trash cans? It's honest work. Don't give me that sanctimonious garbage. Madison began pacing the small office. You've been deliberately hiding from us. You've been listening to confidential conversations, reading privileged documents, watching me work on your case while pretending to be some innocent janitor? I wasn't pretending anything. I am working here. Because of the will. Madison stopped pacing and stared at me. Oh my God, the work requirement. Eleanor Henderson's crazy provision about working in the building for 6 months. You're actually doing it? I said nothing, which was apparently not enough. This is insane, Madison continued. Do you understand what you've put me through? The pressure I've been under to find you? The hours I've worked trying to track you down? No one asked you to take my case. Your case? Madison's laugh was bitter. Natalie, this isn't just your case anymore. This is the biggest legal matter our firm has handled this year. My entire career is riding on this. Your career is based on stealing my inheritance. Madison went very still. What did you say? I heard you, Madison, last night, talking to Mr. Hamilton about challenging the will, finding grounds to declare it invalid. You weren't trying to help me claim my inheritance. You were trying to make sure I never got it. You were eavesdropping on privileged attorney-client communications? I was doing my job. You were the ones talking loudly enough for anyone to hear. Madison sank into Dorothy's chair, her perfectly styled composure finally cracking. Do you have any idea how complicated this is? How many ethical violations have you potentially witnessed? How much trouble could we both be in? We? Yes, we, because now I have to report this conversation to Mr. Hamilton. I have to tell him that the missing beneficiary has been working in our building this entire time, potentially gathering information about our legal strategy. Your strategy to steal from me. It's not stealing. Madison slammed her hand on Dorothy's desk. It's due diligence. When someone inherits $50 million worth of property, we have an obligation to ensure the will is valid and the beneficiary is competent to handle that kind of responsibility. And you've decided I'm not competent? Madison gestured at my uniform, my cleaning supplies. Look at yourself, Natalie. You're working as a janitor when you could walk into any law office in Chicago and claim one of the most valuable commercial properties in the city. Either you don't understand what you've inherited, or you're playing some kind of game. Or maybe I'm doing exactly what Eleanor wanted me to do. Eleanor Henderson was a senile old woman with ridiculous ideas about character building and life lessons. This whole work requirement is absurd. She wasn't senile. She was brilliant, and she saw right through people like you. People like me, Madison's eyes flashed. People who think money determines worth. People who treat service workers like they're invisible. People who would steal from their own family for career advancement. I wasn't stealing from you. Then what were those 3 grounds for challenging the will? What would you do if you proved mental incapacity or undue influence? Madison was quiet for a long moment. Then, The inheritance would have been declared invalid and reverted to the state. And your firm would have collected a massive fee for the work. That's how law firms operate, Natalie. We get paid for our services. Even when those services involve betraying family? I didn't know you were family when I took the case. But you knew last night. You knew yesterday when you were planning to challenge the will, and you didn't stop. Madison stared at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like shame cross her face. But then her professional mask slipped back into place. None of that matters now, she said. What matters is that you've been working here for 3 weeks, which means you're already fulfilling the will's requirements. We can expedite the transfer process and have you officially recognized as the building's owner within a few days. Just like that? Just like that. You'll be one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. Madison stood up, smoothing her skirt. Of course, there will need to be some discussion about attorney-client privilege and what you may have overheard during your employment here. Meaning you'll need to sign some confidentiality agreements, and there may be some compensation involved for any inconvenience this situation has caused the firm. I stared at her. Even now, even after being caught red-handed trying to steal my inheritance, Madison was looking for an angle to profit from the situation. What if I don't want to expedite anything? What? What if I want to finish my 6 months? What if I like working here? Madison looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Natalie, you'll own this building. You can fire the cleaning company and hire whoever you want. You can renovate the entire property. You can raise the rent on every tenant, including Hamilton and Associates. The threat was subtle but clear. Cross us, and we'll be at your mercy. Or, I said slowly, I could keep working here for another 3 months, learning everything I can about how this building really operates, about which tenants treat their service providers well and which ones don't, about which law firms try to steal from their clients and which ones actually serve them. Madison's face went pale. Natalie, you need to think very carefully about what you're saying. I am thinking carefully. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking very carefully about everything. Dorothy's footsteps echoed in the hallway, signaling the end of our private conversation. Madison grabbed my arm. "We're not done talking about this," she whispered urgently. "Meet me tonight, 7 p.m., the cafe across the street. There are things you need to understand about this situation." Like what? Like the fact that your inheritance comes with responsibilities you can't even imagine and enemies you don't know about. Before I could ask what she meant, Dorothy returned, ending our conversation, but not the war that had just begun. The cafe across from Henderson Tower was one of those trendy spots where lawyers and executives paid $12 for coffee and conducted business deals over overpriced salads. I arrived at exactly 7 p.m., still wearing my maintenance uniform, and watched Madison's face tighten with embarrassment as other patrons turned to stare. "Could you at least have changed clothes?" she hissed as I sat down across from her. "This is who I am now, Madison. You better get used to it." She ordered a wine that cost more than I made in a day, while I stuck with black coffee. The contrast wasn't lost on either one of us. "We need to talk about Richard Blackwood," Madison said. "Who?" "Eleanor Henderson's nephew, her late husband's side of the family. He's been contesting the will since the day it was filed." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Contesting it how?" Madison pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of a man in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes. Richard Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Development Corporation. He's been trying to buy Henderson Tower for 15 years. Eleanor always refused to sell. So, when she died and left the building to some unknown relative instead of him, he hired the most expensive legal team in Chicago to challenge the inheritance. They're claiming Eleanor was mentally incompetent and that you manipulated her into changing her will. I never even met her. I know that, you know that, but Blackwood doesn't care about the truth. He cares about getting that building, and he's got the resources to make your life hell until you give up and sell it to him. Madison leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Natalie, these people don't play fair. They've already hired private investigators to dig into your background. They've been following you." "Following me? How do you think I knew to check building employment records today? Someone tipped me off that you might be working in the area under an assumed identity. My blood ran cold. What kind of tip? An anonymous call to our office this morning. Male voice said he had information about the missing Henderson beneficiary. Gave me just enough details to make me suspicious. You think it was Blackwood? I think Blackwood's people have been watching this building, looking for any sign of you. And when they spotted someone who matched your description working maintenance, they decided to smoke you out. I thought about the past few weeks. Had I noticed anyone watching me? Any unusual activity around the building? I'd been so focused on avoiding Madison and doing my job that I hadn't paid attention to external threats. There's more, Madison continued. Blackwood filed a motion yesterday claiming that since you failed to appear and claim your inheritance within a reasonable time frame, the will should be declared abandoned. Can he do that? He can try, and with the right judge, he might succeed. Madison's expression was grim. Eleanor's will specified 6 months of work, but it didn't account for what happens if you disappeared entirely. Blackwood's arguing that your absence proves you're either incompetent or deliberately deceptive in the inheritance. But I haven't disappeared. I've been working in the building the whole time, which we now have to prove in court, and that creates another problem. What problem? Madison hesitated, then pulled out a folder from her briefcase. These are photos taken by Blackwood investigators over the past 2 weeks. She spread out a series of surveillance photos across the table. Me entering Henderson Tower, me cleaning windows, me talking to Dorothy, me in my maintenance uniform looking every inch that Janitor Madison was embarrassed to acknowledge as her sister. They're going to use these to argue that you've been deliberately hiding your identity to avoid legal responsibilities, Madison explained. They'll claim you're trying to game the system, working some minimum wage job while plotting to inherit millions. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from the outside, it looks pretty suspicious. Why would someone who's about to inherit a $50 million building choose to work as a janitor instead of claiming their inheritance immediately? I stared at the photos, feeling trapped. Because that's what Eleanor wanted. She wanted me to understand what real work means. Eleanor's dead, Natalie, and her noble intentions don't matter in court. What matters is that Blackwood can paint you as either mentally unstable or deliberately deceptive. Madison pulled out her phone again and showed me a news article dated that morning. Mystery Harris vanishes. 50 million building left in legal limbo. Is this already public? I asked, shocked. Blackwood leaked it to the press this morning. He's trying to force your hand by making this a public spectacle. I read the article quickly. It portrayed me as a flaky young woman who'd disappeared rather than claim a massive inheritance, suggesting I was either psychologically unfit or hiding something sinister. The comment section was full of people calling me crazy, selfish, and worse. He's destroying my reputation before I even have a chance to defend myself. That's the point. He wants you so overwhelmed and embarrassed that you'll take whatever settlement he offers and disappear forever. Madison leaned back in her chair, studying my face. There's one more thing you need to know about Hamilton and Associates. What about it? We've been representing Blackwood Development for 3 years. Corporate contracts, real estate deals, regulatory issues. They're one of our biggest clients. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You work for him. The firm works for him. I didn't know about the connection when I was assigned to your case. Mr. Hamilton kept the client relationship separate. But you know now. I found out yesterday when Blackwood called the firm directly. He wanted to know why we hadn't located you yet. I felt sick. So everything you've told me about expediting the inheritance, about helping me claim what's mine, it's all true. But it's also true that my firm has a massive conflict of interest. We're supposed to be helping you secure your inheritance while simultaneously representing the man who wants to steal it from you. And which side are you on, Madison? For the first time since I'd known her, my sister looked genuinely conflicted. I don't know, she admitted. This whole situation is way more complicated than I thought. It's not complicated, it's simple. Eleanor left me that building because she thought I deserved it. Blackwood wants to steal it because he thinks he deserves it more. The only question is whether you're going to help your sister or your paycheck. Madison was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. Then, there's something else, something I haven't told you about the investigation. What now? Blackwood's team didn't just find photos of you working at the building. They found out about your real relationship to Eleanor. What real relationship? I told you I never met her. No, but your grandmother did. Regularly, for years. Madison pulled out another document. Eleanor and your grandmother Margaret corresponded for over 30 years. Letters, phone calls, occasional visits. Eleanor had been following your life through Margaret's updates since you were born. I stared at the paper, my mind reeling. That's impossible. Grandma never mentioned having a sister. Half-sister, same father, different mothers. Apparently, there was some kind of family scandal in the 1940s that split them apart. But they reconnected later in life, and Eleanor had been watching you from a distance for decades. Watching me how? Your high school graduation, your college acceptance, your volunteer work at the animal shelter. Eleanor knew everything about you, Natalie. This inheritance wasn't random. It was planned for years. The revelation changed everything. Eleanor hadn't just left her building to a distant relative she'd never met. She'd been carefully evaluating me for most of my life, waiting for the right moment to test my character. Blackwood knows all this, Madison continued. He's going to argue that Eleanor's obsession with you proves she was mentally unstable, that her decision to leave you the building was based on delusion rather than sound judgment. But that's not. It doesn't matter what's true. It matters what looks convincing to a judge. Madison leaned forward urgently. Natalie, you're walking into a war zone. Blackwood has unlimited resources, a team of lawyers who specialize in will contests, and investigators who will dig up every embarrassing detail of your life. So what are you suggesting? Take the settlement. Blackwood's prepared to offer you $10 million cash to walk away from the building. No legal fight, no public humiliation, no years of court battles. $10 million? The building's worth $50 million. The building's worth $50 million if you can keep it. But if you lose in court, it's worth nothing to you. Madison's voice was urgent now. Take the money, Natalie. Start fresh somewhere else. $10 million is still life-changing money. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and realized she was scared. Not for me, but for herself. If this case went badly, if Hamilton and Associates got caught in the middle of a scandal involving conflicts of interest and will contests, her career would be over. You want me to take the settlement because it would solve your problems, not mine. I want you to take the settlement because fighting this will destroy you. Madison's voice rose, causing other patrons to look our way. She lowered it again. You have no idea what you're up against. Then maybe it's time I learned. I stood up, leaving my coffee unfinished. Thank you for the warning, Madison, but I'm not backing down. Natalie, wait! I'll see you at work tomorrow. That is, if you still have a job once your boss finds out you've been feeding information to the enemy. I walked out of the cafe, leaving Madison staring after me with a mixture of fear and something that might have been respect. As I crossed the street toward Henderson Tower, I noticed a black sedan parked across from the building's entrance. Inside, a man with silver hair was watching me through tinted windows. Richard Blackwood had come to see his opposition for himself. I walked straight toward the car, my maintenance uniform and all, and tapped on the passenger window. The window rolled down, revealing the same cold eyes from Madison's photo. Mr. Blackwood, I presume. Miss Myers, you're smaller than I expected. Disappointed? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Not at all. I prefer my opponents to underestimate themselves. Makes the victory more satisfying. Who says you're going to win? Economics, my dear. I can spend more on lawyers than you'll inherit even if you somehow win. This building will be mine eventually. The only question is how much you're willing to suffer first. I guess we'll find out. I turned and walked toward Henderson Tower, feeling his eyes on my back. Tomorrow, the real battle will begin. The next morning brought chaos. I arrived at Henderson Tower to find news vans parked outside and reporters shoving microphones at anyone entering the building. My photo from the surveillance files had somehow leaked overnight. There I was on every local news station, identified as the mystery janitor heiress who'd been hiding in plain sight. Miss Myers, can you comment on allegations that you've been avoiding your legal responsibilities? Is it true you've been living a double life? Why didn't you come forward when the will was first filed? I pushed through the crowd, keeping my head down, and made it to the service entrance. Dorothy was waiting for me, her expression a mixture of concern and bewilderment. Natalie, what the hell is going on? My phone's been ringing all morning with reporters asking about our employment records. It's complicated. Complicated doesn't cover it. I've got news crews camping outside, my supervisors demanding explanations, and half the building's tenants calling to complain about the media circus. Dorothy closed her office door behind us. Please tell me you're not some kind of criminal? I'm not a criminal. I'm just someone who inherited something I didn't expect. Over the next 20 minutes, I explained everything. Eleanor's will, the work requirement, Madison's involvement, and Blackwood's attempts to steal my inheritance. Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. "So you're telling me," she said finally, "that you actually own this building?" "In 3 months, yes, if I can survive that long." Dorothy leaned back in her chair, processing. "You know what the crazy part is? It makes sense. You're the best employee I've ever had, but you always seemed overqualified. The way you talk, the way you handle problems, I kept wondering why someone with your education was working maintenance. And now you know." Now I'm pissed. Dorothy's eyes flashed. "This Blackwood character thinks he can intimidate you by turning your workplace into a media circus? Not on my watch." "Dorothy, you don't understand what you're getting into." "I understand perfectly. I've been managing this building for 12 years. I know every tenant, every lease agreement, every maintenance issue. And if you're really going to own this place, you're going to need allies who know how it actually operates." She pulled out a thick folder from her filing cabinet. "These are the real building records, not the sanitized reports that go to the corporate offices, the actual documentation of tenant complaints, maintenance issues, lease violations, and safety problems." I opened the folder and started reading. Hamilton and Associates had a history of late rent payments and had received multiple complaints from other tenants about noise violations during their late-night client meetings. TechVision Solutions had been illegally subletting unused office space to freelancers. Meridian Financial had installed unauthorized server equipment that was overloading the building's electrical systems. This is incredible. Does Eleanor's estate management company know about any of this? Estate management company? Dorothy laughed bitterly. "Honey, there is no estate management company. After Eleanor died, Blackwood's people somehow got themselves appointed as interim property managers. They've been running this building for 6 months." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Blackwood's been managing my building? Your building, and he's been using that position to systematically violate lease agreements and extract maximum profit. Look at page 15. I flipped to the indicated page and found a memo dated 3 weeks ago. "Rent increases, effective immediately. All tenants, 40% above current lease terms. Non-negotiable. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction proceedings." He can't do this. These leases have specific terms. He's been doing it anyway, and when tenants complain, his lawyers threaten them with breach of contract suits. Dorothy pointed to another document. Hamilton and Associates actually paid the increase, 40% more rent, just like that. Madison's law firm was paying inflated rent to the man who was trying to steal my inheritance, while Madison herself worked to help him do it. The corruption was staggering. "Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. If I fight this, if I really fight Blackwood for control of this building, it's going to get ugly. He has unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. Anyone who helps me is going to become a target." Dorothy was quiet for a moment, then smiled grimly. Natalie, I've been dealing with entitled rich people trying to push around working folks for my entire career. I've never had the chance to push back against someone with real power before. This isn't a game. Blackwood could have you fired, blacklisted. Let him try. I've got documentation of every illegal thing his management company has done since they took over. If he wants to play dirty, I've got 6 months' worth of dirt. Before I could respond, Dorothy's desk phone rang. She answered it, her expression quickly darkening. "What do you mean, they're here? In the building?" She hung up and turned to me. "Security just called. Blackwood's lawyers are in the lobby with eviction notices." "Eviction notices for who?" "For you. They're claiming that since you're not an official tenant and the building is under legal dispute, you have no right to be on the premises." We rushed to the lobby, where I found a scene that looked like something out of a courtroom drama. 3 lawyers in identical dark suits stood near the security desk, flanked by 2 police officers and a man with a camera who was obviously not a journalist, more likely Blackwood's private documentation specialist. The lead lawyer, a woman with steel gray hair and predatory eyes, spotted me immediately. "Ms. Natalie Myers, I presume?" "Yes." "I'm Catherine Pierce, representing Blackwood Development Corporation. I have here a court order requiring you to vacate these premises immediately." She handed me an official-looking document. "You are trespassing on property that is currently under legal dispute." I scanned the document quickly. It was signed by Judge Harrison Blackwood, a fact that wasn't lost on me. "Judge Blackwood," I said, "any relation to your client?" "Judge Harrison Blackwood is Richard Blackwood's cousin," Pierce replied smoothly, "but I assure you that has no bearing on the legal merits of this order." "Of course it doesn't." "Ms. Myers, you have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings and leave the building. Any attempt to return will result in arrest for criminal trespassing." Dorothy stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. Natalie is a Precision Building Services employee. She has every right to be here."
"Ms. Walsh, isn't it?" Pierce turned her attention to Dorothy. "I should inform you that your employment services contract with this building is under review. Continuing to employ Ms. Myers could result in termination of your company's agreement." The threat was clear: help Natalie and lose the contract that probably kept Precision Building Services afloat. But Dorothy just smiled. "Ms. Pierce, I should inform you that all employment decisions for Precision Building Services are made by our owner, who happens to be standing right next to me." Pierce looked confused. "Owner?" "That's right," Dorothy continued. "Precision Building Services is a wholly owned subsidiary of Henderson Property Management, which is controlled by the Henderson Estate Trust. And since Ms. Myers is the sole beneficiary of that trust, she's actually my boss." I stared at Dorothy in shock. This was news to me. Pierce's composure cracked slightly. "That's impossible. Our records show—" "Your records are incomplete," Dorothy interrupted. "Eleanor Henderson was a very private woman who preferred complex corporate structures. Most people never bothered to trace the ownership chains back to their source." Pierce whispered urgently to one of her associates, who pulled out a phone and started making calls. Meanwhile, the police officers were looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ms. Myers," one of the officers said, "given the complexity of this situation, perhaps we should wait for further clarification before proceeding with any eviction." "Officer, I have a valid court order," Pierce began. "From a judge who's related to the plaintiff," the officer replied. "Look, lady, I'm not getting in the middle of some rich people's inheritance fight. Unless someone's committing a clear crime, we're staying out of it." As Pierce and her team huddled for an emergency consultation, Dorothy leaned over to me. "Is what you said about the subsidiary true?" I whispered. "Every word. Eleanor was brilliant at hiding assets. Blackwood has no idea how many companies and properties are actually part of your inheritance." "How do you know all this?" Dorothy smiled. "Because Eleanor asked me to keep an eye on things until you showed up. She knew Blackwood would try exactly this kind of stunt." Pierce finished her consultation and approached us again, her expression now showing barely controlled anger. "This matter is far from over, Ms. Myers. You may have won this particular skirmish, but the war has just begun." "Looking forward to it," I replied. As Pierce and her team left the lobby, followed by the reluctant police officers, I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine confidence. "Dorothy," I said, "I think it's time we stopped playing defense." "What did you have in mind?" "Blackwood thinks he can intimidate me by threatening my job and my access to the building, but what has the building itself fought back?" "How?" I thought about all the lease violations, the illegal rent increases, the safety issues that had been ignored. How many tenants' complaints about Blackwood's management do we have on file? Dozens, maybe hundreds. And how many of those tenants would be interested in joining a class action lawsuit against their current property management company? "Oh, I think we can find a few volunteers." "Good, because it's time Mr. Blackwood learned that when you come after the janitor, sometimes the whole building comes after you." As we headed back to Dorothy's office to plan our counterattack, I caught sight of Madison through the glass doors of Hamilton and Associates. She was standing at the window watching the aftermath of Pierce's failed eviction attempt. For the first time since this whole thing started, my sister looked afraid. Good. It was about time someone in this family learned what real consequences looked like. 2 weeks later, I stood in the largest conference room of Henderson Tower, my building, wearing a tailored business suit instead of my maintenance uniform. Across the table sat Richard Blackwood, his army of lawyers, and notably absent from his usual spot, Madison. The past 14 days had been a whirlwind. Dorothy and I had worked around the clock, contacting every tenant in the building and documenting every illegal action Blackwood's management company had taken. What we discovered was worse than we'd imagined. "Let's begin," said Judge Patricia Hoffman, a different judge than Blackwood's cousin, thanks to a successful motion for recusal filed by my new legal team. I'd hired Morrison and Associates, the same firm that had originally delivered Eleanor's will, and they'd brought in reinforcements. "Your Honor," began Jennifer Morrison, my lead attorney, "we're here today because Mr. Blackwood has systematically violated his fiduciary duties as interim property manager, exploited tenants through illegal rent increases, and attempted to manipulate legal proceedings through family connections." Blackwood's lawyer, Catherine Pierce, stood up. "Your Honor, these are desperate allegations from someone who abandoned her inheritance for months and only surfaced when it became financially advantageous." "Miss Pierce," Judge Hoffman interrupted, "Miss Myers was fulfilling the explicit requirements of her great-aunt's will. She had every right to work in the building during the mandated 6-month period." "Which brings us to our first exhibit," Morrison continued, pulling out a thick folder. "Documentation showing that Miss Myers has successfully completed 4.5 months of employment at Henderson Tower, well within the will's requirements." She placed Dorothy's meticulously kept employment records on the evidence table. Timesheets, performance reviews, even testimonials from tenants who had interacted with me during my maintenance work. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "we have evidence that Mr. Blackwood used his position as interim property manager to deliberately sabotage the building's operations in an attempt to decrease its value before a potential forced sale." This was our ace in the hole. Dorothy had discovered that Blackwood's management company had been deferring essential maintenance, allowing safety violations to accumulate, and creating conditions that would justify condemning the building if his legal challenges succeeded. "Objection!" Pierce stood up. "These allegations are documented extensively," Morrison interrupted, producing another folder. "We have work orders that were ignored, safety inspections that were falsified, and maintenance requests that were deliberately delayed." Judge Hoffman examined the documents, her expression growing increasingly stern. "Mr. Blackwood, these are serious accusations." Blackwood spoke for the first time, his voice calm but tight with controlled anger. "Your Honor, property management involves difficult decisions about resource allocation. We prioritized the most critical issues." "Like increasing your own management fees by 300% while cutting the maintenance budget by 60%? Morrison shot back, producing financial records that Dorothy had somehow obtained. "Like subletting office space without tenant consent and pocketing the profits?"
The room fell silent, except for the sound of papers rustling as Judge Hoffman reviewed the evidence. Finally, she looked up. Miss Pierce, does your client have any response to these financial irregularities? Before Pierce could answer, the conference room door opened and Madison walked in. But she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by Mr. Hamilton and two other partners from her law firm. Your Honor, Mr. Hamilton said, we apologize for the interruption, but Hamilton and Associates has just discovered a significant conflict of interest that requires immediate disclosure. Blackwood's face went white. Robert, what are you doing? The right thing, finally, Mr. Hamilton replied coldly. Your Honor, our firm has been representing both the Henderson estate and Blackwood Development simultaneously. When we discovered this conflict 3 days ago, we immediately began an internal investigation. Madison stepped forward, carrying a box of documents. Your Honor, these are copies of communications between Blackwood Development showing a deliberate strategy to delay the estate proceedings while Mr. Blackwood positioned himself to acquire the property through his management company. Madison, what the hell are you doing? Blackwood snarled. My job, Madison replied firmly. My actual job, which is to serve my clients' interests, not help you steal from them. She handed a folder to Morrison. These documents show that Mr. Blackwood instructed us to find any possible grounds for challenging the will, regardless of merit. He also requested that we delay all proceedings for at least 6 months while he established claims to the property through adverse possession and management rights. Judge Hoffman's expression was now openly furious. Mr. Blackwood, these allegations suggest criminal fraud. Your Honor, Pierce said desperately, my client was simply protecting his legitimate business interests. By instructing his lawyers to commit ethics violations, by using a family connection to obtain questionable court orders, by systematically looting a property that didn't belong to him? Morrison stood up again. Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence. She pulled out an envelope I recognized, the same elegant script that had been on Eleanor's letter to me.
This is a sealed letter from Eleanor Henderson, to be opened only in the event that her will was challenged by Richard Blackwood specifically. That's impossible, Blackwood said. Eleanor died before she could know I would contest. Eleanor Henderson knew exactly what kind of man you were, Morrison interrupted, opening the envelope. She prepared for this contingency. Morrison began reading. If this letter is being read in court, it means Richard Blackwood has done exactly what I expected, attempted to steal my building through legal manipulation and corruption. Richard, you spent 15 years trying to pressure me into selling Henderson Tower. You sent lawyers, made threats, even had your city council friends try to condemn the property for urban renewal. I never sold because I knew what you would do with it. You would evict the small businesses, raise rents until only corporations could afford them, and turn my building into another soulless monument to greed. Instead, I chose to leave it to someone who understands that buildings aren't just investments, they're communities. Someone who would work alongside the people who keep the lights on and the floors clean, rather than treating them as invisible. Natalie Myers earned this inheritance not through birth or manipulation, but through character. She spent 6 months learning what it really means to serve others, to take pride in honest work, and to see the dignity in every person who contributes to making a place better. Richard, you never understood that wealth without character is just expensive emptiness. I hope my final act teaches you something about both. The silence in the room was deafening. Judge Hoffman set down the letter and looked directly at Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, I'm dismissing all challenges to Eleanor Henderson's will. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into your management company's financial irregularities and potential criminal violations. Your Honor, Pierce began, I'm not finished. Mr. Blackwood, you have 48 hours to provide a complete accounting of all funds collected during your management of Henderson Tower, including any profits derived from unauthorized activities. Any discrepancies will be referred to the district attorney. Judge Hoffman turned to me. Miss Myers, congratulations. Henderson Tower is officially yours. As the legal teams packed up their documents and Blackwood stormed out with his remaining lawyers, I found myself alone in the conference room with Madison. Why? I asked simply. Madison was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. Do you remember when we were kids and Mom used to make us clean the house together before Dad got home from work? Yeah. You always did the hard jobs, scrubbing the bathroom, mopping the kitchen floor, taking out the trash. I did the easy stuff, dusting the living room, organizing books, but you never complained. So when I saw you working here, really working, doing the same job you've always done, taking care of things other people don't want to deal with, I realized I'd spent my entire adult life trying to become someone who would look down on the person I used to be. Madison turned to face me. And when I heard Eleanor's letter about character and dignity and honest work, I realized you never stopped being that person. You never forgot that work has value regardless of the paycheck. Does this mean you're quitting Hamilton and Associates? Madison smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years. Actually, Mr. Hamilton offered me a partnership. Apparently, having the integrity to expose a client's criminal behavior is considered a positive trait in some law firms. And I accepted, on one condition, which was that our first order of business would be helping the Henderson Tower tenants file their class action lawsuit against Blackwood Development for the illegal rent increases and property damage. I stared at my sister, hardly believing what I was hearing. You want to sue your former client? I want to make sure that every business owner Blackwood ripped off gets their money back. I want to see him face consequences for treating people like they don't matter. We stood together in the conference room of my building, looking out at the city where both of our lives were about to change dramatically. Natalie, Madison said quietly, I owe you an apology. Not just for the past few months, but for years of acting like success meant stepping on other people. You never did that, even when you had every reason to. Thank you. And I have a proposal. What kind of proposal? Madison pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Henderson Tower Legal Services, a tenant advocacy firm operating out of the 20th floor, providing legal support for small businesses and working families who can't afford the big corporate firms. I looked at the card, then at my sister. You want to work for me? I want to work with you. You'll own the building, and you'll know what the tenants really need. I'll provide the legal expertise to make sure they get it. What about the prestige, the high-profile corporate clients, the expensive suits and $12 coffee? Madison laughed. You know what's funny? For the first time in my career, I actually feel proud of the work I'm doing. That's worth more than any prestige. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Henderson Tower wearing jeans and a Henderson Tower property management shirt, my own company now. The building hummed with activity, small businesses thriving under fair lease terms, a daycare center on the second floor for employees' children, and Henderson Tower Legal Services helping tenants navigate everything from employment disputes to immigration issues. Dorothy had been promoted to Director of Operations with a substantial raise and equity stake in the property management company. The maintenance staff now received full benefits, competitive wages, and profit-sharing bonuses. And every Friday afternoon, I still put on my gray uniform and cleaned the executive floors. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember where I came from and who I was working for. The building's newsletter that month featured a photo of me mopping the 20th floor with the caption, Owner and CEO Natalie Myers believes great leadership starts with understanding every job in the organization. Some people called it a publicity stunt. Others called it eccentric behavior from a young CEO. I called it keeping a promise to Eleanor Henderson and to myself. Because the best way to honor a gift isn't to simply accept it, but to prove every day that you were worthy of receiving it in the first place. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.